Welcome to an alternate past. Today's video is, what if Columbus never discovered the Americas? Imagine, in the year 1492, Columbus never set sail, never landed, never claimed the New World for Spain. The course of history has altered forever. What would our world look like without the so-called discovery of the Americas? Would Europe have continued to dominate with its colonial empires? Would the indigenous civilizations have evolved differently? The ripples of such a change would be earth-shaking. Let's start with the European perspective. The wealth of the Americas significantly boosted European economies, especially Spain and Portugal. Columbus' discovery initiated a gold rush, creating vast wealth and funding countless ventures, wars, and empires. Without this influx of resources, the European powers might have lagged behind, financially and technologically. Without American gold and silver, the massive stimulus to the European economy is removed, potentially delaying the Industrial Revolution. The very timeline of the modern world's development is thrown into chaos. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the indigenous civilizations, the Aztecs, Incas, Sioux, Cherokee, and countless others, continue their lives undisturbed. The catastrophic consequences of European colonization, disease, violence, enslavement, and cultural erasure are avoided. The indigenous populations, numbering in the millions, might see a continuation of their rich and diverse cultural histories. The Aztec and Incan empires could potentially grow dominant, their technologies and infrastructure rivaling or even surpassing those of Europe. In this alternate timeline, where the Americas remain isolated, the transatlantic slave trade never takes shape. The forced migration and unimaginable suffering of 12 million Africans, uprooted from their homes and subjected to brutal conditions, are avoided. What social and cultural developments might have flourished in Africa instead, free from the horrors and depopulation of the slave trade? The absence of European colonization also alters the global spice trade. European empires would turn eastward for new ventures, seeking riches in Asia and Africa. This shift could amplify European presence and influence in these regions much earlier. How might the landscape of Asian and African development differ under intensified European contact, trade, and conflict? The political boundaries, too, would be wildly different. Nations we today recognize could never form or follow a different trajectory altogether. Religious history changes course as well. The spread of Christianity in the Americas is halted, preventing the fusion of native traditions with Christianity that led to unique religious practices in Latin America. With no European influence, native religions passed down through generations without interruption, preserving ancient beliefs and traditions. The Americas develop a wholly separate religious and philosophical evolution from the rest of the world. Consider the cultural and scientific impacts. Many foods we take for granted today, like potatoes, tomatoes, and corn, all native to the Americas, remain unknown to the rest of the world. European and Asian diets, agricultural practices, and cuisines evolve entirely differently without these staple crops. Our culinary landscapes would be nearly unrecognizable. Notably, interpersonal relations across continents, understanding of geography, and global politics transform without the age of exploration initiated by Columbus. What would have been the European motivation to explore further afield without the seduction of uncharted lands and vast wealth? Maritime technology may develop slower, altering the very fabric of global interaction. Who else might have discovered America? Perhaps the Vikings' fleeting settlements reignite interest, sparking far earlier European colonization efforts. Or the Chinese, who charted much of the Pacific, might have landed on American shores, leading to an entirely different cultural and genetic blend in the New World. The mingling of peoples and ideas takes on radically different patterns. Without Columbus's precedent, what of the future United States? Would the clash and subsequent birth of such nations take an entirely different route? The unique culture that arose from mixing indigenous, African, and European influences is irreplaceable, and its absence profoundly alters global culture. Europe, without the New World, remains central, but possibly less influential, as other continents gain prominence. In essence, The entire trajectory of global colonialism traces back to Columbus's fateful voyage. Every European power scrambling for territory and resources dramatically shifts focus. Borders, as we know them, fracture. Alliances and rivalries pivot in unexpected directions. The battles fought, nations built, and the very essence of geopolitics becomes a divergent pathway. In a world where Columbus never discovered the Americas, everything changes. Wealth distribution, cultural exchanges, technological progressions, social structures, and even the mapping of our world. A single event in history, or the absence of it, demonstrates the astonishingly fragile nature of the timeline that led to our present existence.